At exactly 2:47 p.m., as Lincoln Elementary's dismissal crowd gathered at the crosswalk, Mrs. Sarah Mitchell noticed the man walking toward the school entrance with a pace that didn't match the relaxed rhythm of parents and staff. His hands were wrong, his scanning pattern was wrong, and every instinct earned through 156 SWAT operations told her this wasn't a custodial visit. In the next 3 minutes, the children waiting to cross Maple Street would learn that their crossing guard wasn't just someone who stopped traffic. She was someone who had spent 20 years stopping threats that most people pray they'll never face. Every story you're about to hear was earned, not given. This is Sarah Mitchell's story, a woman who had been protecting Lincoln Elementary's corner for 12 years, ensuring children could cross safely to waiting parents. But Sarah's expertise in protection had been earned through experiences that went far beyond traffic control, through 2 decades where keeping people safe meant the difference between successful operations and unthinkable tragedies. Welcome to Earned Stories. Before we share this powerful story of earned courage and continued protection, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button, because every story we tell here was earned through dedication, sacrifice, and the understanding that some people are born to protect others. Lincoln Elementary sat on a busy corner where Maple Street intersected with Roosevelt Avenue, the kind of intersection that made parents nervous every time their children had to cross. For 12 years, that worry had been eased by the presence of Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, the most reliable crossing guard Riverside had ever seen. Sarah had earned her position through consistency that bordered on the supernatural. Rain or shine, snow or blazing heat, she was there at 7:45 a.m. and 2:45 p.m., positioned at her corner with the same equipment, an orange safety vest, a stop sign, and a whistle that could stop traffic from 3 blocks away. Parents trusted her with their most precious cargo. "Mrs. Sarah keeps our kids safe," was what newcomers heard from established families. "She's been here longer than some of these kids have been alive, and not one child has ever been hurt on her watch." What they saw was a woman in her early 50s, average height with graying brown hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail. Sarah wore sensible shoes for standing on asphalt all day, and her orange vest was always clean and properly reflective. She knew every child's name, remembered which ones needed extra encouragement, and had a way of making even the most anxious kindergartner feel safe crossing the street. But if parents had looked closer, and most people don't really look at crossing guards, they might have noticed things that didn't quite fit the typical school safety volunteer profile. The way Sarah's eyes constantly scanned, not just for approaching vehicles, but for anything that seemed out of place. The systematic way she positioned herself to maintain visual contact with multiple approach routes. The calm authority in her voice that made both children and drivers obey immediately. Sarah's vigilance had been earned through 20 years where missing details meant people died. Her positioning wasn't random, it was tactical. Her awareness wasn't paranoia, it was professional survival instinct applied to a new mission. Sarah Mitchell hadn't always been a school crossing guard. Before she'd earned the trust of Lincoln Elementary's families, she had earned her badge through 2 decades with the Riverside Police Department's Special Weapons and Tactics Unit, where she'd risen to team commander through operations that tested everything she thought she knew about courage under pressure. 20 years in SWAT had taught Sarah that protection wasn't about reacting to danger. It was about seeing it before it arrived, reading the signs that most people missed, and positioning yourself to act when seconds mattered more than anything else in the world. Sarah had earned her expertise through 156 high-risk operations, hostage situations where negotiation failed and force was the only option, barricaded suspects who threatened innocent lives, active shooter scenarios where her team was the thin line between chaos and catastrophe. Each operation had taught her something new about reading human behavior, assessing threats, and making decisions when hesitation meant people didn't go home to their families. When Sarah retired from active duty at 50, the transition to civilian life wasn't what most people expected. She could have taken security consulting jobs, could have trained other SWAT teams, could have parlayed her experience into any number of high-paying positions. Instead, she chose to work at Lincoln Elementary, protecting children at a crosswalk. Why crossing guard? People asked when they learned about her background. Sarah's answer was always the same: because this is where people need protection. The expertise doesn't change just because the uniform does. Sarah understood something that civilian life rarely teaches. The highest expression of earned skill isn't using it where it's recognized. It's applying it where it's needed most. And nowhere was protection needed more than at the corner where 400 children crossed twice a day, trusting that the woman with the stop sign would keep them safe. Every school day at 2:30 6:30 p.m., Sarah would begin her afternoon routine, what parents saw as simple preparation for dismissal, but what was actually a tactical assessment earned through operations where environmental awareness meant survival. Sarah's positioning at the crosswalk wasn't arbitrary. She stood where she could observe 3 different approach routes, maintain clear sight lines to the school's main entrance, and respond quickly to any situation that might develop. Her orange vest wasn't just safety equipment. It was positioned to allow rapid movement while maintaining visibility and authority. The whistle hanging around her neck served dual purposes. Yes, it stopped traffic when children were crossing, but Sarah also knew how to use it as an emergency signal that would bring every adult within hearing distance running to assist. The stop sign in her hand was regulation equipment, but Sarah held it in a way that could double as a defensive tool if necessary. Parents saw Sarah chatting with their children, learning names and asking about school projects. What they didn't realize was that Sarah was conducting psychological assessments, noting which children were comfortable with strangers, which ones followed safety instructions, and which ones might need extra protection in an emergency. Mrs. Sarah knows everything that happens around this school, was how Principal Martinez described her to new teachers. She notices if a maintenance worker she doesn't recognize shows up, if someone's parked in an unusual spot, if anything seems off about the normal routine. What Principal Martinez attributed to community dedication was actually threat detection skills earned through SWAT operations, where identifying problems before they escalated was the difference between successful missions and casualties. During quieter moments while children were in class, Sarah would walk the perimeter of school grounds, ostensibly checking for traffic issues, but actually conducting security sweeps that ensured no threats were developing while her attention was focused elsewhere. Tuesday, October 15th, 2:47 p.m. The afternoon dismissal was proceeding normally when Sarah noticed him, a man in his 30s, walking toward the school's main entrance with movement patterns that triggered every alarm system Sarah had developed through 2 decades of reading dangerous people. His pace was too deliberate for a parent running late. His scanning pattern was too systematic for someone looking for a child. Most concerning, his hands kept returning to something inside his jacket, a gesture Sarah had seen countless times during SWAT operations. The unconscious checking that concealed weapons make. Sarah's threat assessment was immediate and comprehensive. Probable armed individual, approaching soft target during peak vulnerability window. Response time for backup would be minimum 8 minutes. 400 children inside the building, 30 more waiting at the crosswalk. Sarah's radio was tuned to the school's emergency frequency, but she knew that calling for help would take time they didn't have. The man was 50 yards from the main entrance and closing. In less than 2 minutes, he would be inside the building, where Sarah's ability to intervene would be severely limited. Sarah made a tactical decision based on 20 years of experience in situations where doing nothing guaranteed casualties. She was going to intercept, moving with purpose that transformed her from neighborhood crossing guard to tactical operator. Sarah began walking toward the approaching threat. Her orange vest remained visible. She was still the school's protector, still the familiar face that children trusted. But her movement patterns, her positioning, her entire bearing had shifted into something most people in Riverside had never seen. "Children, please step back from the street," Sarah called to the group waiting at the crosswalk, her voice carrying an authority that made them obey immediately. To the parents present, it looked like routine safety management. To Sarah, it was clearing a potential engagement zone. The man was 30 yards from the school entrance when Sarah intercepted his path. To any observer, it looked like a crossing guard approaching someone who might be lost. To Sarah, it was a tactical interview designed to assess threat level and prevent escalation. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said, positioning herself between the man and the school entrance while maintaining a non-threatening posture. "Are you here to pick up a student? I'll need to see your ID for our visitor log." The man's response confirmed Sarah's assessment. His hand moved immediately toward his jacket. His body language shifted to aggressive positioning, and his eyes showed the kind of focused intent that Sarah had learned to recognize in people who had already committed to violence. "I don't need to show you anything, lady," he replied, attempting to move around Sarah toward the school. "Get out of my way." Sarah didn't move. Instead, she shifted into a stance that looked casual to observers, but provided optimal balance and mobility for what she knew was coming. Her years of SWAT training had taught her that the moment someone refused legitimate authority while approaching a target, the situation had moved beyond de-escalation. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stop right there," Sarah said, her voice calm, but carrying the kind of authority that had once commanded tactical teams. "School policy requires all visitors to check in at the office." That's when the man reached for his weapon. Sarah's response was instantaneous and revealed training that had nothing to do with traffic safety. In one fluid motion, she stepped inside the man's reach, controlled his weapon hand with techniques earned through countless hours of defensive tactics training, and used her body positioning to prevent him from drawing the handgun Sarah could now see clearly. The engagement lasted less than 15 seconds. Sarah's movements were precise, controlled, and executed with the kind of professional competence that comes from training where mistakes have permanent consequences. The man found himself face down on the sidewalk, his weapon secured, and a woman he'd dismissed as just another school employee controlling him with restraint techniques that belonged in a police academy, not a crosswalk. "Principal Martinez," Sarah said calmly into her radio while maintaining control of the suspect, "we have a code red situation at the main entrance. Individual is secured, weapon recovered, no students at risk. Request immediate law enforcement response." Riverside police arrived at 2:53 p.m. to find a situation that defied easy explanation. A school crossing guard had single-handedly prevented what appeared to be a planned attack on Lincoln Elementary, using techniques that indicated extensive law enforcement training. "Ma'am," said Officer Jennifer Chen, the first responder on scene, "I need to understand what happened here." Sarah looked at this young officer and made a decision about how much to reveal. 20 years. Riverside PD SWAT. Retired commander. Someone tried to hurt these kids. Officer Chen stared at the woman still wearing her orange crossing guard vest, understanding suddenly why the situation had been resolved with such professional competence. "SWAT Commander Mitchell? You're Sarah Mitchell?" The recognition in Officer Chen's voice attracted the attention of other responding officers, several of whom had heard stories about the legendary SWAT commander who had led some of the department's most successful operations before quietly retiring to work at an elementary school. Within an hour, word had spread through both the police department and the school community. Sarah Mitchell, the crossing guard who had kept their children safe for 12 years, had revealed herself to be someone whose expertise and protection went far beyond what anyone had imagined. But it was the parents' response that surprised Sarah most. Instead of shock or concern about having someone with her background around their children, they expressed overwhelming gratitude for finally understanding why their corner had always felt so safe. "Mrs. Sarah has been protecting our babies for 12 years, said Maria Rodriguez, whose daughter had been in kindergarten when Sarah first started at Lincoln. "We just didn't know how qualified she was to do it." Principal Martinez was more direct. "Sarah saved lives today, but she's been protecting this school every day for 12 years. We're the luckiest school in the district." The investigation revealed that the suspect had been planning an attack on Lincoln Elementary for weeks, had studied the school's routines, and had chosen dismissal time specifically because he believed it would provide maximum casualties with minimum security response. What he hadn't planned for was encountering someone whose entire career had been built around stopping exactly the kind of threat he represented. 6 months after the incident, Sarah returned to her position at the crosswalk with the same orange vest, the same stop sign, and the same commitment to keeping Lincoln Elementary's children safe. Her routine was exactly the same. Arrive 15 minutes early, position herself for optimal coverage, and ensure that every child crossed safely. But everything else had changed. Parents now understood that the woman protecting their children possessed expertise that had been earned through experiences most people couldn't imagine. The casual conversations continued, but with an undercurrent of respect for someone whose vigilance had deeper roots than community dedication. Sarah's story reminded everyone who heard it that heroes don't always wear uniforms, carry badges, or seek recognition. Sometimes they wear orange vests, hold stop signs, and use skills earned through decades of service to protect the next generation, one safe crossing at a time. 3 years later, Sarah was still at her corner, still ensuring that Lincoln Elementary remained the safest crossing in Riverside. She'd become part of the school's legacy, a quiet professional whose presence made everyone safer, whether they understood the depth of her qualifications or not. Sarah Mitchell's story was earned through 20 years in SWAT operations, where 156 successful missions taught her that protecting others isn't just about stopping immediate threats. It's about creating environments where people can live without fear. Her greatest achievement wasn't preventing one attack in 90 seconds. It was 12 years of using skills earned through the most demanding law enforcement training to ensure that children could go to school safely, parents could drop them off without worry, and a community could function without knowing how well they were being protected. She never advertised her background because her work spoke for itself, never sought recognition because she'd already earned the only reward that mattered, the trust of families who knew their children were safe on her watch. That's what earned service looks like. Expertise applied where it's needed most, not where it's recognized best. Skills transferred from protecting the community at large to protecting individual children, each one precious, each one deserving the absolute best that earned experience can provide. So I ask you, what expertise have you earned that could protect others in unexpected ways? How are you using skills learned in high-stakes high-stakes environments to make everyday situations safer for people who might never know they needed protection. Share your story in the comments. Tell us about someone whose earned vigilance made your life safer or better, even if they never sought credit for their exceptional dedication. Because here at Earned Stories, we believe that the most valuable protection often comes from ordinary settings, provided by people whose extraordinary skills were earned in ways most of us will never understand. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who choose to use their earned expertise protecting the future, one child at a time, one safe crossing at a time, one moment of quiet vigilance at a time. Thank you for watching. If this earned story moved you, subscribe to Earned Stories for more tales of earned courage and continued service. And remember, every child deserves someone watching out for them whose skills were earned through dedication and sacrifice.